All right, so Michelle sent me a Marco Polo with this rant after we had started the wisdom series, and she started doing a rant about faux wisdom in the mental health world and in therapy because you are a mental health professional. You are a therapist,
Yes,
correct?
that's right.
Yes.
Hmm.
And what you sent me, I then sent Marco Polo to Joel yesterday, and I was like, here's our starting point. And he responded right away. He's like laughing. He's like, yes, you have to read that. It's so good. Here's what you said. You said there's so much faux wisdom about mental health because it makes people feel better, but not be better. And I get wanting to feel better. It's easier to pathologize someone than to actually understand what's happening. It's about responsibility and complexity. If your answer automatically relieves you of responsibility, which is
Oof.
why people are drawn to calling their ex a narcissist, and or it's overly simplistic, that isn't an accurate picture of the world. Very little is simple. I know for a fact that very few people are narcissists. They're not narcissists because they cheated on you, and they're not borderline because you cheated on them and they got mad about it. Gaslighting, Lord, it happens, but not as much as TikTok would have you believe. Knowledge is essential, but it's not sufficient. It takes complexity and self examination. Not everyone wants to hear wisdom, so a wise person would hold back because they know that there's no substitute for experience. Advice will fall flat, it doesn't work. What they need is for someone who is authentic with them, who walk with them. And there's so many one liners. I was just like, I'm getting this for free on a Marco Polo. This is genius.
It's a good opener to a book, isn't it?
It's
Oh,
so
that's very
good.
kind. That's
Oh,
very
it's
kind. It's
so
a lot of
good.
words. Yep, yep.
Well, that's so funny. That's what you responded to me. You're like, I had so many words. Like that's. I was like, I didn't think so. I thought every second of it was gold.
Awesome. Okay. I love to hear that. That's so good. Well, I think, you know, the theme you're hearing is about if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. That's an oldie but a goodie. So I like to think that my job, I'm a licensed professional counselor, and that my job is wisdom to hold knowledge that is hard and try to impart that to people at the pace that they can take it in.
The pace they can take it in. I'm just like, ooh,
Yeah.
how? Okay,
Have you
help,
ever had
help.
this experience
This is
of,
gonna help me as a coach right now. I know it is. I'm like, yes, tell me.
so I'm thinking about a woman who came to me one time, and it's the very first session, and she actually came to me to talk about her child who was struggling. And of course, I'm asking about her broader context, including her marriage. And as she just starts to describe her marriage to me, I realize if I tell her what's true, I think it might end her marriage. I'm hearing that it's not okay what's happening in her marriage. She was oblivious to it. She wasn't ready to take that in. So I have a choice. I can say, look, I know I've only known you for 15 minutes, but let me tell you what I hear. Because a marriage that has these features, it's never going to be okay. I could blow up her marriage that way. She wasn't ready to hear that. And the reason I know that is because the brain is very good at blocking out what we're not ready to know. So part of my job is to determine whether a person is ready for what I can see, because I have the benefit of being an outside party. But then I always have the security of knowing if I just lay it out there too soon, people will become defensive or they'll become confused. They'll tell me all the reasons I'm wrong, which is them saying, I'm not ready for this. I can't take in this wisdom yet. So part of that rant was people learn by experience. And yes, us contributing what we know or what we see is helpful to help them make sense of their experience, but they've got to live it. I have two children in their 20s, and they have to gain experience the same way I did, through making mistakes, pain. That's a terrible message. Learning by pain. Sometimes we learn by joy, but a lot of times we learn by pain. So people just aren't always ready to hear what's true. I'm sure you both see that in your coaching.
Yes, and I think we all have kind of a scale where some of us may err on waiting too long to tell them the thing they need to hear. And I err on the side of saying too quickly when it comes to that scale. I think it's really hard to calibrate that. Like you said something a second ago. You said the brain is really good at shutting out what it does not want to hear, what it isn't ready for. And I wonder if you could explain a little more around that. And then how do you gauge when someone's ready to hear something? That the thing that could save their life, especially.
Yeah. So the part about the brain that I was talking about, we have these really sophisticated defense mechanisms that keep out what we're not ready to take in. This is something I learned very early in my training as a therapist, before I was even out of school. You craft this beautiful, wise, true statement that is going to change and save somebody's life. You just know it. Okay, when they come in, I'm going to let them know. And then they look at you and they blink and they're quiet. And then they say, no, I don't think that's it. And you're thinking, but no, that's exactly because the mind calculates, if I know this to be true, then what has to happen next? And maybe I'm not ready for that yet. And so we have all of these ways of either shutting people out who are telling us things we don't want to hear, or just internally rejecting it and saying, no, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's right. And I can't count the number of times I have looked back that somebody tried to tell me something that was true, and I just rejected it flat out. I will say the stronger my rejection of somebody who was trying to give me wisdom, the more likely their wisdom was true. You know what I'm saying? Like the defense comes up really big. When somebody is telling me a truth and I think, well, maybe, and I have some openness to it, maybe that really isn't what's true for me.
Interesting. Do you feel like that's a common thing with people, or more specific to some than others?
I think it's common. I'm trying to think of an exception.
Yeah.
And I'm not coming up with one.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're saying that maybe there's like a readiness that can come over time for people to be willing to hear wisdom. Joel and I were just talking about this last week about someone we know who's made this decision, and we were wondering, like, at some point, are they going to realize this was not a good decision? Are they going to at some point realize? But the brain is also so good at reinforcing. It's the cost sunk bias. Like I've invested in this direction, in this decision, so it's almost impossible to kind of turn around. So do you think that's why some people, the readiness doesn't appear because the journey isn't taken? Or how do people get better, Michelle?
Yeah,
Because
I'm
that's
not
my
making you
question.
optimistic, am I? Well, okay, and I need to label, you said something very true. Some people are too quick to lean in and offer wisdom, and some people are too slow. I am too slow. So I do want to say I probably am too cautious. It's something that I'm learning, that people a lot of times are ready for more than I give them credit for. So I'm the other end of the scale from you. So as I think about, like, when are people ready to absorb wisdom, I think you're right about that cost sunk bias. Like, oh my goodness, if I now realize that I made a bad decision, I mean, just the impact, all the bad decisions that have followed in order to support that decision, it's overwhelming. But I do think a lot of times we know things that we don't know we know yet. So on some level, your friend may know that they made a bad decision, and they're getting little signs and signals. And sure, maybe they're discrediting them through that bias. but just the weight of moving forward, and I'm getting evidence after evidence after evidence that it was bad. At some point, they'll have enough of those pieces that you coming along and saying, I think this all started with that decision, will just glue all the pieces together that they already have. They know it on some level. Now they're open to you coming in and saying this wisdom that pulls it all together. If you come in with the wisdom before they're ready for all the pieces to come together, then your contribution is just a piece in their puzzle.
Yeah. A friend of mine has some wisdom around this that I shared with a corporate executive I was working with last week, because he's preparing to give all of his feedback to all of his employees for the year. And so he was looking at their Enneagram types, and we were discussing the feedback he had to give and the best way to do that. And a friend of mine gave me this little calibration that I found useful in this space, where it kind of helps to balance the two things, the two ends of the spectrum that you and I might be on, where he talks about like high support and high challenge, and how both of those are needed in like a coaching or a therapeutic environment. Pastors, whoever, you're trying to lead someone somewhere. Because if there's low challenge and low relational support, there isn't really much going on. There's inertia, there's apathy. When there's really high support, but there isn't enough challenge, it's like an insulator. So it's like stagnation, dependency, right? If it's really high challenge, but it's not very high support, they feel dominated. It's about survival and compliance, right? Mm-hmm. But when you have that high support and that high challenge, when both of those are present, they know you're for them. They know that you care about them. You want them to succeed, and you're willing to challenge them to be what they can be. That's when you like activate something happening. That's where there's like growth, where there's commitment, where good things can happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I haven't learned how to calibrate that completely yet, but like that's a goal that I'd like to have, you know.
So it reminds me of I have a lot of parents come to me who have children who don't want to take certain risks, you know, like performing in front of the school at a talent show, or taking swim lessons is a big one that a lot of kids have fears around. And so parents are asking me, how much do I push and how much do I protect? And my answer to them is always, if I knew the perfect answer, I would be a billionaire. Because it is so situation dependent, meaning your child on that given day, in that given moment, with that given challenge.
Yeah.
So the only way you know for sure is you push until they push back in a way that you think, oh, that was too much of a push. And then you calibrate back. So I don't know that you always know going into whether it's a therapy session or a swim meet what the exact amount of push is going to be. You just have to be attuned to when you have pushed too far.
Oh, man. And it's, for me, I'm going, oh, I'm so much better at that in coaching than I am in parenting, but that's a topic for another day. It's
Same.
Like, in coaching, I can calibrate it so much more. In parenting, I'm like way too much challenge often. And
it's so personal.
It's very frustrating.
It is so much harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to back up a little bit, I think what you suggested, Michelle, is spot on in terms of like recognizing when your child or when your client or a friend that you're sort of challenging, when it's too much. And it's an intuitive process. And I know that's frustrating to people because they want left-brained answers, but you also have a right brain, and you can walk in that just as effectively as you can in the left brain. You just have to practice, and the intuition around, and the dialogue too. Just, hey, this is too much, and I can feel that, I can see that. This will break them, and you make a call. And sometimes we're not confident in doing that, so we might hesitate. But you have to walk in the confidence of, this is the best that I know at this moment, and the repair is always available to me. And I think that if we think of it in those terms rather than getting it right the first time, it's helpful. It also occurred to me that, in terms of the wisdom of of how to grow, it's I don't know when someone's ready. It's really not always that clear. Sometimes it's very clear. They come to you and you know they're ready for change. But I like what you said in terms of they're sort of like these pieces that are coming together, and then when they are ready, you're the guide that somehow is able to help them see how all the pieces do actually fit and create this picture. But it made me think of this thing, and this is a long-winded way to get to this point here, but there's the wound, there's the wounder, the healer, and there are guides.
Hmm.
And there are times when we don't want to be the wounder and we don't want to be the cause of a wound. And some of us prefer to be the healer, you know. But I think that there are roles for all of that. I don't know that I would have ever learned that I needed to change unless I was confronted by loss, relational loss,
Hmm.
where people in my network and my family system said no more. And they created boundaries to protect themselves from me.
Hmm.
And that was not a great time in my life, but it was the most pivotal time in my life because I couldn't deny anymore that I was acting in a way that was causing this, and I wasn't aware of it. So there are wounds, and they're great, they're necessary, they're painful, but they're powerful, and so I think that's an important component to growth as well.
So that I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, we do grow through pain so often, which is why I get really passionate and send impassioned polos about the impact of social media on mental health, because I think that a lot of these oversimplified ideas that people are buying into are ways for them not to hurt.
Yeah.
And I get that. Nobody wants to hurt or suffer, but if we successfully avoid suffering, we also avoid growth. And so that's where this idea that anybody who hurt you in a relationship is a narcissist, there's no growth in that. It says everything was that person's fault. There was nothing I could have done. And while that may feel good in a moment, that leaves you powerless.
Mm-hmm.
That means I'm walking through the world and there are these bad actors who can take all of my joy and all of my freedom. And I just have to let that happen to me. I think people do that because they're thinking in extremes. It was either that person's fault or my fault. So when people were putting boundaries up that didn't feel good for you, you could have easily said, well, they're just too sensitive.
Oh, yeah.
Or
I certainly did.
sure, of course
Yeah.
hey, present company included. We all do that initially. But at some point, if you can have that internal maturity to say, you know, it's pretty unlikely that a relationship not going well is fully one person's fault. That's just unlikely. And listen, people do bad things in the world. This isn't an extreme either. I'm not saying all relationships have equal blame to go around, but you can usually find something to learn from a relationship that's gone wrong. And resting in, well, they're just a narcissist or a borderline, or it can flip the other way. Instead of making the other person a complete bad guy, it's I'm just a complete victim.
Oh,
well, he should have known I was a sensitive person and never set a boundary with me. It's just so limiting. It's comforting in the moment, very much like, I don't know, fast food. It
Yeah.
tastes great in the moment. It will never completely scratch the itch.
Well, you know, you hear a lot of these days around gaslighting. And at some point, you know, where is the part of that you develop, that you tune in to develop greater agency internally, greater strength internally, to not that you're not affected. You will always be affected. That's the other extreme that goes in completely the other direction, which is still not good either. It's like the other extreme of I'm unaffected by everything. It's like, no, you are. Everyone is. It's just that some play the victim and some play the savior or the hero, you know, and we are affected, but if everybody else is the problem, they're the ones who gaslit me, then like you're saying, where's the responsibility for personal growth, and how we respond, and why is it that there's a trigger there? That might be a great place to explore and to grow. Uh, we've been saying triggers are teachers for a long time, and it really is. It's a opportunity to pay attention to what is that. Why is there that sensitivity internally? That's just having this really strong visceral reaction
Yeah.
to what this person's doing or saying.
So, here's something I hope everybody listening will stop and hear. If you are hurting, you deserve comfort and care. Period. Hard stop.
Yes.
Even if you aren't a complete victim.
Yes.
Even if you too were part of the bad thing that happened, you don't have to be 100% free of blame or responsibility to still have people pull close to you and care that you are hurting. So all of the needing for it to be that there was a villain, you don't have to do that. You still deserve to be seen in your pain. It doesn't have to be 100%.
Yeah, so good, Michelle. So very good.
Yeah.
because it's like either the monster's out there or the monster's me. I'm the cause of this thing. But like, look, you were wounded, right? Let's take the wound and let's validate that. Let's validate the emotions around that, support that. Doesn't mean validating your interpretation of that, such as that person, it's all their fault. But yeah,
Well, I
that's
see,
really good.
and I'm curious about this with a lot of romantic relationships, because I've had several friends go through this the last couple years, particularly women. I don't know so much with the men, but particularly with women, where after the breakup, they do look at their former partner as the villain. And it's kind of like they were this way, they were that way. And then as some more time passed, they shifted gears into like, well, what's wrong with me that I chose this kind of person? Right. So they go from one to the other. It's like it was this person. Well, but what's wrong with me for choosing this person? And then it's this back and this forth between how do you respond to something like that?
Gently. um, Gosh, that one's really complicated. Like you're saying, it's this pendulum swing of a person who's going through that process is trying to figure out first, it eases my pain to think it was all their fault. But then they hit that point of, but my goodness, if it was all their fault, kind of what I was saying earlier, then I have no agency in this world. So now they're trying to find where they had agency. Maybe a more productive question. And there is some productivity in how did I end up with a person who ended up hurting me, who I
Right.
probably ended up
Sure.
hurting. But what did I learn from that? Were there signs along the way, or were there points along the way where where I wish I had made different choices? Maybe I couldn't have at the time. Maybe I really did make the best choices I knew how to make. Probably you did. I think we generally are doing the best we can. But now that I'm looking back, what happened? Genuinely, what happened? So my kind of philosophy of, I would say my practice, but maybe also my life, what I have learned in 25 years of being a therapist is people are doing the best they can. And they do bad things, they do wrong things, they do harmful, damaging things, but they don't generally do them because they're lazy or crazy or bad or stupid. It is because it is the best they know how to do. So I think my job is to figure out, why was that the best they could do? Because while that was their best, they also can do better. It's both. So that's what I would want the women that you're talking about, or anybody, to ask themselves, why was that the best I could do at the moment?
I think that's an amazing question, because it's not that is the best you can do. You said, why was that the best I could do at that time?
Mm-hmm.
That's
And now you know better.
Wow, that's really good.
There
So
should be some practices taught to us all from early on of like, what are some wisdom practices in engaging in relationships? Because it's not that you're going to get it right every time.
Mm-mm.
Like, well, next time getting into a relationship, I might have the same problem, right? What did I not know then, but what do I not know now, right? So people get paralyzed in terms of re-engaging. And so how do we have a practice? What is the practice, a wisdom practice that can help us to grow through what we're going through, as opposed to, again, trying to get it right, trying to make sure we don't get into a bad relationship again? Practices that can help us to navigate that and continue to grow.
I mean, you know, I'm going to talk about attachment now. So,
I love it. Bring it.
without diving too deeply, when people are under stress, they tend to either go too fast or pull back and go too slow. So, just in general, and you probably know, if you don't know which your tendency is, ask anybody you are in a relationship with. They will tell you.
Yeah, that's right.
When you just go to, I mean anybody, friend, parent, child, partner, you say, "Hey, hun, when when I'm stressed, do I tend to be too much or do I tend to disappear?" And they will answer more quickly than you are comfortable
My
with.
gosh, yes.
So knowing that about yourself, if you are a too much person, then that says to you, can you slow down and just pay attention? Your body is telling you
Yeah.
that this is not right. A lot of us have a hard time being in our body and our brain and our heart all at the same time. So do you need to slow down, or do you need to be more engaged? Because the other side are people who, when things get hard, they're gone. They're distracting themselves, they're turning their attention elsewhere. And it's a really brave thing to show up, to slow down and show up, or to keep engaged and show up. So here's an analogy that I like to use when I'm working with couples. A lot of couples who come to me want to know, how can we avoid fights or tension or stress? Of course. And my answer is, I don't really want you to avoid them. Because in order to do that, you're going to have to be really tense and rigid all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be afraid. So the analogy I use is driving a car on a road that has a cliff on one side and a mountain on the other. So there's nowhere to go. If you don't keep it on the road, if you have any conflict, any difficulty, something terrible is going to happen, because you don't have any way to get it back on the road. As soon as you go off the road, you either crash into the ocean or crash into the side of the mountain. So what I would rather, and you referenced this earlier, Joel, is that you don't have to be as afraid of conflict, that you're able to make repair. So let's build a shoulder. It is still not going to feel good to veer off the road. But if we know that when we veer off, we're going to be on a shoulder and we're going to say, "Oh, wow, this doesn't feel good. We got into a bad place. What are we going to do to fix it?" Now, when you're driving down the road, you don't have to have a death grip on the steering wheel, because any little bobble to the right or left could be death for the relationship. It will still feel bad. We're still going to try to keep it on the road, but we can relax a little bit because we know that we can pull it back in. So that's for relationships. It's also for our own growth. If you are so afraid of making a mistake, your lessons will be more painful. I will say that. You will still make mistakes. But the willingness to make a mistake is what gives you courage to do really hard things.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. The willingness gives you the courage to do the hard things. Or to even go back to your rant at the beginning, there's the do better side of things, but there's also the feel better. And a lot of the faux wisdom out there, it is to make you feel better. So maybe there's even a place for it in terms of like it's okay to feel better for a short amount of time, but there is the death by comfort that I worry about. There's a amazing documentary, my favorite documentary of all time. It's called Free Solo, and it's about this guy, Alex Honnold, who did a free solo of the El Capitan Mountain in Yosemite, and it's a 3,000-foot granite face. And free climbing means you climb up free, but then you have a rope that you clip in. To free solo means you climb without a rope. The film is about him climbing without a rope this entire mountain, and it's a really dangerous thing that he's doing. They said it's like doing an Olympic level athletic achievement, and if you do not get gold, the consequence is death. And so, but what he does is he's all about preparation and doing as much preparation. And he had this statement that I thought was fascinating. He said that a lot of people look at what I do as incredibly dangerous. He goes, I think about it as far as risk and consequence. So what I'm doing is very high consequence, but it's actually low risk because of how much I prepare. And he says people who sit on their couch eating junk food every day and they're not exercising, he would say it's very low consequence, but it's very high risk because over time, the result is going to be you're actually weaker. You're not prepared to handle anything that comes up hard. And I think people do this emotionally too. If there isn't this confrontation with pain, and if the explanation we give to it is always this faux wisdom where we feel better but we don't do better, then we are actually like the person sitting on the couch eating junk food all the time. We become weak that anything comes up, we can't handle it.
Yeah.
And so I love this idea of, going through the preparation where relationships are high consequence. But if you are willing to navigate, that's actually lower risk, right? So it's because of this capacity to do these things. And so I'd love to look at some of the things that you see out there right now that is faux wisdom. And even if we make fun of them a little bit, it's not that there isn't a place for them. It's just that understand it's junk food. Maybe that's the context of these things. These are out in the world, and some of them are, maybe it's like having a cupcake at a birthday party, and some of them are like living on a diet of Twinkies.
Well, and to give an overall in terms of the wisdom, back to the wisdom theme, is that the wisdom has to do with seeing. It has to do with, do you see what it is that you're doing? Do you understand more deeply what's going on? So if you're having a cupcake and you are aware you're eating a cupcake, that's not a lack of wisdom. I think a lack of wisdom, is when you're eating a cupcake and then you're on to number 3 and number 4.
I was just going to say, I didn't realize this was my 3rd cupcake.
Yeah. That's right. It's like, wow, really? Have I eaten all those cupcakes?
Yeah.
Those wrappers.
Yeah. Why are they on my plate? Who put them on my plate?
Right. Which is mindfulness, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Know that you're eating the cupcake, and that I don't have any problem with comfort. There is a sweet spot for learning, and we do need to be under some stress. But when we are just flat suffering, we're not wired to do that forever either, which is the whole root of addiction. Every brain prefers connection, healthy connection with other people for comfort and care. But when that is not available, or we cannot accept it for a variety of reasons, then we will take the fast food, the cupcake of, because we're just not meant to suffer forever. So faux wisdom, I would say anything that makes it too easy probably isn't true. So here are things that set my teeth on edge.
Yeah, bring it.
The problem with millennials is, boomers all think that Generation X is, so those broad generalizations, and I do hear it happen with the generations, but because it's not quite acceptable anymore to do it about gender or race, It's a little bit more acceptable to do it about religion, but these ideas that say all people of that group fill in the blank, I doubt it. I doubt it.
Good
It's
one.
awfully convenient to believe that. So I presented a training recently on spirituality and how to incorporate that into therapy. And you guys will know this is true. All of the world's major religions and most of the minor ones agree on more than they disagree. They are all preaching generosity, mercy, helping the poor, respect for your elders, honesty. I mean, they're really, and so
Forgiveness,
I think, yes,
dedication, attention, personal discipline, responsibility. Yes, all of it.
yeah. And that is true. I would dare to say, even across political parties, we agree on more than we disagree. So I would say that's number one of faux wisdom, that you can classify a group of people, know everything about somebody just by how they vote or when they were born or where they go to church or that they don't go to church. Because also, I should say this too, when I say most of the world's religions, all of those values that we just listed, I think people who aren't especially religious or faithful also subscribe to those because they're not psychopaths.
That's right.
Like, honestly, because they are engaged in this world.
Yeah.
So,
Or where we're from. So, like, you're from the South, where
Right.
everyone is nice, and we're from New England, where everyone is mean and rude. Right?
yeah. Yeah.
It's the reason why we're called mass holes.
That's awesome. I have not heard that. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that the first time I visited the Northeast, I went to New York with my daughter. I was fully bought into the stereotypes that people were going to be rude and dismissive, and they were lovely. They were wonderful. We had such a good time. I mean, the vast majority of people we encountered, and I was not a young person. I mean, I had really bought into that stereotype, and it just wasn't true.
Yeah. There's something to what you look for, you find.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will keep finding. And that's another bit of wisdom. Like, pay attention to what you're looking for in terms of classifications, even like what you're talking about, where, oh, yeah, all New Yorkers are this way and all New Englanders are that way. And, you know, the Midwest is this way. And
Mhm.
it's like, well, there are generalities, but then that is a terrible thing if we evaluate people as individuals by these generalities that we're making. And
Yeah. Which goes back to not being present. If you are really present with a person, you can evaluate what's actually happening rather than sort of that global label that you've put on them. Another generalization that I think just isn't true is, the problem with kids today is, and it's almost always social media or media, movies and TV or video games. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. Well, in the 60s, they were blaming rock and roll, right? In this era, they're blaming this, and this era, they're blaming it on the. It's always some external thing, right? It's not that the external thing is a reflection of what's going on internally for them, right? It couldn't
Right.
possibly be that. It's like these external forces of, video games or rock and roll or social media or, I think it was like in the 70s, there was a magazine, the Time magazine called The New Generation, the Me Generation. And then and I'm like, maybe it's because they're young, but every single generation gets accused of being like selfish and all about themselves. I'm like, it just doesn't freaking work. And I'm like, but I don't even understand who that makes feel better. Like, I think when we're talking about the feel better, do better and the faux wisdom, I'm like, who does this even make feel better? Like, I don't know.
I think it's the older generations who feel really challenged. So I have children in their 20s, and I do feel challenged by them. I will say this about that generation. Statistically, they volunteer more than any older generation has when they were their age. They have a higher social awareness. Why? Partially because of the internet and social media. So, of course, there are good things about that generation. I think it doesn't feel great when you when you think you have everything in the world figured out, and then a 20-year-old makes a comment and you're like, shoot, they're right. I wasn't being kind. I wasn't being generous. Or I'm just not up to date on everything anymore. And so the pushback is, oh, they're so elitist. They're so, whatever. I think that's why that happens, is a defensiveness when they have a lot to teach us.
Mm. What else do you see? What are some things that fall into this category? You said you had some lists of things, so I just want to hear them.
Basically, anything that boils down to something too simple, like anyone who disagrees with me is gaslighting me. Nope. Guess what? They aren't. And I will say this. If you are in a relationship with somebody who's dismissive, somebody's going to tell you they're a narcissist. And it's probably going to be your therapist, which is not okay. It's not okay. If your therapist is diagnosing someone they've never met, that's a problem.
Ooh, say that again. Ooh, please say that again. They're not in the room. Say it again.
Yep. If the person being diagnosed is not in the room, that is a problem. And it is a problem. I mean, it's a problem ethically. We're not allowed to do that. It is also a problem for you because it's giving you the cupcake. Don't worry about it. You're fine. You just wound up with a narcissist. That, quote, narcissist has a story too. They have a reason that they were that way. So, and by the way, if the person you were with was more anxious in their attachment style, you're being told that they were a borderline, that they were overly emotional.
So what is borderline?
Much.
What does this mean?
So a person with borderline personality disorder is somebody who is exquisitely sensitive to abandonment and will do a lot of really dramatic things to make sure that they aren't abandoned, including things like suicide attempts or really controlling and manipulative behaviors. And does that exist in the world? It does. But that's a really big diagnosis to give somebody. Mm-hmm. And there are certain kinds of attachment wounds that will make a person engage in those behaviors, and they don't have a personality disorder. They are deeply, deeply hurt. And smacking that label on them, all it does is just excuse the person that hurt them. So we just have to be a little wise about how we go about that. Yeah.
No, I just love that. Like, that's so important. Diagnosing someone who's not in the room is unethical for the therapist to do. So if your therapist is diagnosing someone who isn't in the room because they're only hearing your side of the story, that's not a good sign, right?
Exactly.
And we shouldn't be diagnosing anyone when we don't know what we're talking about. Like those of us who are lay people,
right?
Right? Because there's a lot of that on. That's why I love in your rant you were like, gaslighting. Yes, it happens, but not nearly as much as TikTok would have you believe. And it's like this is a social media phenomenon where there is this. Well, this person was gaslighting. This is gaslighting. Like, watch out for this. And there is a little bit of that. Anyone who disagrees with me, kind of a thing.
Right.
Or who says, no, you're absolutely wrong. Or I didn't actually do that. Like sometimes people didn't do the thing you thought they did.
Right.
And they're not gaslighting you when they disagree.
They really aren't. Gaslighting is persistent. It is pervasive, and it is incredibly harmful. So if you think about it, when a lot of people are running around just throwing these terms around, it really undermines the pain of the people who've actually lived with an actual narcissist or have really been gaslit or love somebody with borderline personality disorder. These things are, it's disrespectful, I think, of people who've actually endured that. And to be clear, I don't think disrespect is meant. I really don't. I think it's just become a shorthand for how to talk about these things. And in casual conversation, have at it. But if you're really wanting to grow and learn and have quality interactions, we're going to have to be more nuanced in how we talk about what our experience was.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the issue that I'm having, is that people are using actual clinical, psychological, diagnosable terms as slang for an experience they're having.
Right. That's exactly right. And if you know that that's what you're doing and the person you're talking to knows that that's what you're doing, I can be okay with that. But let's be careful because about, again, just the nuance of what actually happened. What guidance are you going to take? How are you going to talk about this in meaningful ways?
Yeah.
So another, I mean, this one's as old as time. It's such a stereotype, I guess, of therapy is it's your parents' fault. So I don't completely disagree with that. And I do say that as a parent because parenting has a tremendous impact on how we understand the world, how we move in the world. But I like to ask clients, what do you know about your parents' upbringing? What do you know about their story? So my experience is most parents, I mean, the vast majority of parents do the absolute best that they can. And it is almost never everything that their kids deserve. It is both. And so the pain is real and the impact is real of parents not being perfect or perfectly what you needed them to be. But that's a great example of if we stop there. Oh, well, clearly your mother was a narcissist. So you need to cut off your contact with her and you're just a victim of narcissism. Like what that is very comforting maybe in the moment because all of this harm that my mother did to me, I can sort of slough off and say those were lies that were told to me. And I get where that feels better. And some of that may be true. But that's it. Hard stop. That relationship, there's nowhere to go with that. And so what can be helpful is understanding if your parents weren't perfect, it's probably because of a story that they experienced before you ever existed. You did not create that behavior in them. They brought it to the table and they probably lived out a story with a less than perfect parent also. So I have people come to me sometimes who will have symptoms as though they've been through trauma, but they've never been through trauma. They really have had just pretty normal lives, just the normal range of hard things and easy things. And when we dig, a lot of times it's because their parents have been through trauma. So picture this. Let's say you are a child and somebody knocks at the door. And you witness your mother go to the door and open the door, and there stands a man at the door. And your mother is clearly tense and afraid around this man. As a child, you only have limited information about what's happening, but you know in your body, mom is scared. So if mom has a trauma history that says a strange male coming to the door is danger, that can be transmitted to you, especially if it happens over and over and over. We're in the store and a man says hello to her and she tenses up. Over time, we can start to internalize that lesson, even though nothing's ever happened to us. And mom's not trying to scare us. She's not trying to transmit her trauma. But if it's unhealed, trauma that isn't healed is transmitted, then we can end up with some fears that make zero sense to us. But they make sense. I promise you they make sense. And we're not going to be mad at mom for transmitting her trauma to us. She was doing the best that she knew how to do. And we want to honor your fear that is real and that is hard and that it's both. We're honoring both.
Yeah.
That is complex and that is not pithy and that doesn't make for a great 30-second TikTok.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'll see when I make some edits and throw them on TikTok. We'll see.
That's right.
Sorry, Joel. Go ahead.
Take all of Michelle's best lines and throw them up there.
Well, you just said the word trauma, and I think this is an exchange I had, with my daughter recently, and I'm like that term should be reserved over here, but I also don't want to invalidate the experiences that you or your friends had. But they're like, oh my gosh, so and so did this to so and so at school. It was like such a trauma, and I'm like, no. Like, again, it's using a term like trauma as a slang word more than an actual, like someone who saw their friends die in war, someone who grew up in a household of perpetual abuse. I even like how you clarified gaslighting as, no, this is something that is like ongoing over a long period of time repeatedly to put a person in a particular situation. Like you're giving the more holistic picture of the snap term that's used in a jargony slang kind of way.
Let's say you are at a point in your growth journey where you understand that the people who hurt you also have hurts, and that they're coming from a place, that they too can be good people. I think that's good to realize. I think that's really healing. And you don't have to let those people hurt you anymore. Just because they have a story, just because they have a valid reason for acting in the ways they do, you don't have to let them keep hurting you. Boundaries are such a good and right thing when they are used to keep us from being our worst selves or being hurt. So it does sometimes come about that I work with someone whose parents were not healthy or are not healthy for them. The interactions are not healthy. And sometimes they come to the realization that there's no way that they can operate within that relationship and not continue to be harmed. And so we are going to have to put a little distance there. It's not where I jump to first, but sometimes that can be, with a former partner. Maybe you understand why they did what they did. Okay, fine. They're not a narcissist, but they really, really hurt me. And there is no sign that they aren't going to continue doing that. So I'm going to have to put some distance in there. But that is very different than I'm cutting you off because you're a narcissist. You're a terrible person who can never change. Is very different from I can't keep engaging with you. It's too painful and it's unhealthy.
Yeah, that's a practical approach too, that I think is necessary for growth. Is you have to have a boundary. What I mean by practical is you can take an idealistic perspective of, I should be able to handle this. I should be stronger. Or you can take another approach, the other extreme, and say, no, it's all these people. They're dangerous people, like the whole everybody's a narcissist kind of thing. And I think that the proper approach to boundaries, because that's one of my concerns, is the way that's being used today. Is boundaries are being thrown around like everybody needs to have better boundaries, and what we're doing is sort of blockading ourselves from deeper connection. Then we're left unsatisfied and wondering, what's going on, that we're not happy. So I do think that we do need boundaries, but we also need to couple boundaries with personal growth so that we do become stronger. And that doesn't mean, again, unaffected. It means the ability. I look at it as an immune system. It's like you are going to get affected. You are going to get sick, but do you have an immune system that can strengthen you, that can repair, that can move you forward? So, if we're doing that, then we're able to grow through and not have these boundaries be permanent barriers. Now, in some cases, I mean, some boundaries, you just have to have them because somebody is really evil or somebody is an extreme sociopath or narcissist or whatever. And that is, you just can't allow that in your world. But as you're saying, that's far and few between. The majority of people, it's like, yeah, they're wounded or they did something, and you might need boundaries for a while. And as you get stronger, perhaps then you'll have a bit more space to handle them and to be gracious towards them. But I think it's, there's no fast answer here, but I think it's this, my voicing my concern around the boundaries thing, that I think that can be pushed to such an extreme, and I've watched that happen, and it separates permanently, in some cases, relationships.
There has been a real misunderstanding. And I will say, anytime somebody is learning something new, they're probably not going to be great at it in the beginning. That is to be expected. So I see this in my practice when people are first learning about boundaries and what they are and how powerful they are. They tend to get a little ham-fisted with it. So, I mean, they're running around setting boundaries all over the place, and the boundary sounds like, I don't like this, so you can't do it.
Right.
That's actually not a boundary.
Yeah.
That's just being demanding, but that's okay. We're trying to shape into. So a boundary is if this particular thing happens, here's how I will respond. And now you make your choices based on that. An example might be if you're always late, if you are always making us late, I don't want to be late anymore. So I'm leaving on time. And if you're ready, fantastic, come with me. And if not, you'll probably just need to drive separately. That's a boundary. It says, here's what I intend to do. Now, you do what you're going to do. You make your own choices. And you have to, as the person setting the boundary, be okay with that.
Yeah, you're using the term boundary as a personal thing. Boundary is not how I boundary you. It has nothing to do with
Right.
any control of the other person, which is
Yes.
definitely a way that I hear this used in a faux wisdom
Yeah,
kind of
that's good.
context. Is like, no, I'm using this. A boundary is an attempt to control the behavior of another.
Control. Exactly. And boundaries are not control. They are very much about yourself. What's okay, what's not okay,
Yeah.
and what I will do in response.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
I'd love to finish with this question, and I'm going to phrase it the best way I can. Last year, I tore a ligament in my hip, and I tried to like do PT, and it wasn't ready for it. I actually had to do about a week and a half of ice and rest, like elevation, ice and rest. Then I was able to go into the PT and start to do it. And then I actually was like, oh, I feel better. And I went too far, actually had to then back up a step and had to do. So it's like this progress. So there is the thing at the beginning of, I'm focusing on this feel better and then do better, that actually is the journey. So if someone's on the couch, they are maybe living in this death by comfort, right? It's making myself feel better, but I'm not doing better. How do we go from the couch to 5K kind of a concept where I'm on the couch, but I want to actually be more resilient, more capable, take more responsibility. I want to get to the place where I'm more capable and I can get off the couch, where I'm not just like every time my hip hurts, I'm just taking medication for it. I'm just reaching for the Advil, as opposed to strengthening the muscles to get out there. That's the feel better, do better thing.
Yes.
If we took that concept into the relational emotional realm, how do we go from the couch to the 5K?
That is a perfect analogy, because the first thing you have to know is, can I accept the treatment? And so in your instance, you couldn't accept the treatment yet. Your body wasn't ready for PT. My belief is that the treatment for when our heart is hurt is connection, is having somebody walk through the pain with us. So when someone's on the couch and they are wounded, a lot of people have strategy. Well, we all have strategies that can keep us from having healthy connection. So the first thing we have to do is figure out, what are the barriers to me walking through your pain with you? They might be your barriers, like it feels too intimate and personal, so you shut me out. You don't show up to therapy, or you change the topic, or you talk so much that because you're afraid to hear what I'm going to say. So what's happening that puts up barriers to connection? And by the way, the barriers could be mine too. There might be certain kinds of pain that are really hard for me to walk through. So that happens in our friendships and our relationships all the time. I'm totally showing up when you lose your job. I'm there when you have a fight with your mom. But if the pain has something to do with our relationship, I'm out. That's my limitation. So, but back to couch to 5K, which is a great question. First, we're sort of seeing what the barriers are to the treatment, which is connection, and then building that connection. So you didn't go to PT, even when okay, now I've done the icing, I've done the rest. I'm feeling better. You didn't go into PT the first day and they put you on all the heaviest machines. And right, there was a building process to see what you could tolerate. And there may have been a point where they had you do an exercise and it was like, no, too much. That hurts. That's going to hurt me. So you have to dial it back. But there also could have been moments where they were going too easy on you. It wasn't an intense enough treatment. And it's like, we're kind of languishing here. I can take the intensity. In this case, it would be, I can take somebody calling out, circling all the way back to the beginning of our conversation today. I actually can take the hard feedback. I can now tolerate hearing the things that maybe I couldn't tolerate hearing 6 weeks ago.
I think that's fantastic. What you're saying reminds me a lot of a friend of mine who helped me recover from one of these injuries that I got in jiu-jitsu. And he gave me these exercises. He said, but the thing is, you're trying to increase blood flow without overloading it. He says, when you're doing the movements, keep your pain between a 1 and a 3. And I thought that was really good advice. And I've kept that through, and it's helped me recover from a few things since then. Because he's like, if your pain is up into that 5, 6 territory, you're actually not improving it. You're not going to grow. It's not going to get stronger. It's actually going to, the whole whatever doesn't kill us make us stronger. No, you're actually getting weaker. You're not going to get stronger. But if you stay at 0, you're also never going to get stronger. So it's like it was almost like this. There's an ideal amount of pressure. And that's why I hear you saying there's like an ideal amount that you kind of have to measure to kind of keep yourself in there so that you actually can do better and grow at a rate that is tolerable for you.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any last thoughts for us, Michelle? That was really good. I really appreciated that.
I would just repeat that anything that seems too easy probably is.
Yeah.
Your example just now was about nuance, not too much, not too little, that I just don't think there are many things in life that are simple.
They're easy to understand, but they're difficult to do.
Right. So maybe they are, yeah, exactly. Simple, but not easy.
There we go.
That's it. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I love talking to you about this stuff. You are just such a brilliant person when it comes to this kind of topic. And I don't feel nearly done. I know we're like out of time, but I feel like there's a lot more we could dig into on this at another point in time. So
anytime. Thank you. I love talking to you guys. You're such a bright spot in my day. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for asking me.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.